Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. So it's already 4 o'clock here in China and 10 o'clock in Brussels in Europe. I think it's already time to start the webinar. I see that everyone is still joining in, but nevertheless, here we go. So welcome again, everyone, to our webinar today, how to minimize risks of scams. The webinar is organized by the EU SME Center in collaboration with the China-Italy Chamber of Commerce. So I am Helika Jürgensen. I am the EU SME Center's Training Center Manager, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Joining me today will be Alessio Petino from EU SME Center, Eloisa Hu from Wangqing and GH Law Firm, as well as Federica Vigiani from the China-Italy Chamber of Commerce. Moving to the agenda today. In the agenda today, we have 2 presentations, one presentation from Alessio Petino and another presentation from Eloisa Hu. And after the presentations, we shall have the Q&A session where you can pose your questions to the participants today. So let me also introduce both of the speakers today. We have Alessio Petino, who is the business advisor at EU SME Center. Alessio has over 6 years of experience with various EU-funded projects in China. His key focus areas include market access, regulations and barriers, investment attraction policies, standards and compliance. Today, Alessio will share with us practical advice on how to detect and avoid potential scams. He shall also introduce the EU SME Center's article on simple steps to minimize risks of being scammed. The second speaker today is Ms. Eloisa Hu from the Wangqing and GH Law Firm. Eloisa provides legal services on trademark, data protection, as well as commercial disputes and labor disputes and foreign direct investment projects. She has years of experience advising foreign clients. Today, Eloisa will explain to us what we can do if we're nevertheless being scammed. So, as I said, after the 2 presentations, we shall have the Q&A session. So we will take the questions after both presentations. And you can use the Q&A box to type in your question, or if you raise your hand, then you can be unmuted for saying aloud or reading aloud your question. Please also pay attention that today's webinar is recorded, and the recording shall be made available via our website, via the EU SME Center website. So now, before moving on to do our presentations today, I would also like to give a short introduction of EU SME Center, and after that I will ask Federica Vigiani to give an introduction of the CICC. So the EU SME Center is a European Union initiative funded under the Single Market Programme that provides comprehensive range of hands-on support services to European small and medium-sized enterprises, getting them ready to do business in China. Launched back in 2010, the EU SME Center is currently in its 4th phase, implemented by the 6 consortium partners and associated partners. You can see the logos on the slide. And EU SME Center provides advice and support in 4 areas: business development, law, standards and conformity, and human resources. Let's take also quickly a closer look at our services at the EU SME Center. The center, you can see, provides a self-diagnosis tool, which is an online tool that SMEs can use to measure their readiness to enter China market by answering a set of questions. It is a recommended first step for all SMEs planning to do business in China. Moving on, through the SME Center's website, companies can access the Knowledge Center, which is our comprehensive library of market reports, guides, and case studies to improve the knowledge of SMEs in China markets. As another service, we have the Advice Center, which offers confidential and practical first-line advice on business development standards, law conformity, as well as anything business-related, China business-related, while making sure that companies get all the information that they need for the internationalization to China. We also operate a training center, which provides on-site and online trainings to plug the knowledge and skills gaps of SMEs. The last but not least, EU SME Center operates an advocacy center, which is a coherent and consistent, which provides a coherent and consistent voice of EU SMEs vis-a-vis the Chinese policymakers. And with this, I will stop my intervention on the EU SME Center's introduction. I would like to give floor to Federica Viciani. Federica, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Elika, and it's always a pleasure to organize the events with the center. I will take a very short amount of your time just to shortly introduce to those of the participants that are not still yet part of our network, what is the China-Italy Chamber of Commerce and what we do. So the China-Italy Chamber of Commerce is the only business organization recognized by both the Italian government and the People's Republic of China. We were founded in 1991, and as of 2021, we have over 800 members and friends. Our member base is mostly composed by Italian companies, either present in China or interested in doing business with China, and also Chinese companies interested in business with Italy as friends of CICC affiliated. Our chamber has 7 offices in key territories in China. We are here now in Beijing, talking from the headquarters. And of course, the chamber is part of the Italian system here in China, together with Italian institutions based here. To the companies, part of our member base, we offer business support and business services. And part of this is also our working groups, including the working groups on intellectual property, which actually is also a business group established within our chamber, gathering professionals with expertise in legal, IP, and so also Ms. Eloisa Hu is part of this group. And this is, again, a group within the chamber that is going to join for all our members interested in these topics. So thank you very much, and now I'll leave the floor to the speakers.
Thank you, Federica. Yes, Alessio, you will have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Elika. Thank you, Federica. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here and to be presenting on this very important topic. It seems that this topic is more actual than ever, and so that's why we decided to do the first webinar of this new SME Center phase on this topic. In fact, we are seeing that despite all the supply chain issues, all the considerations that are being taken when moving goods internationally, European companies are still buying a lot from China. There is still a lot of interest in buying and supplying goods, in procuring goods from China. Unfortunately, what we see, I'm trying to change screen. What we see every week, literally every week, we receive emails from European companies that when buying from China, they encounter big issues. And of course, every issue is different, is unique. But in general, let's say that there are 2 main scenarios. The first one is that when they buy goods, they receive the goods and they find out that they are lower quality than what agreed in the contract, or they're even defective. A more rare scenario, but the more unfortunate one, is that companies buy the goods, purchase the goods, but actually the goods are never shipped, and actually the seller disappears after a while. So these are very two common scenarios, not the two only ones, of course, but these are the most common one, I would say. What is important to, what we always stress to companies that reach out to us is that these are, in most of the cases, these are pretty simple scams, and this can be really avoided, or the majority of this can at least be avoided if identifying a series of flags, or and taking a series of preventive measures. And that's why we wrote an article on this as SME Center. You can find the link here, also the QR code to the left, to access this article, which is free. You only need to be logged in on our website. And what I'm going to present today is exactly the content of these articles. So first I would like to start with some examples, and then I will move into the core section. So again, these are just four random examples. There are so many, but just did one because they're pretty recent. The first one is this Croatian company that bought some UV lamps from a Guangdong manufacturer. They paid in advance 20,000 euro. They received the lamps after a while, but and then they delivered the lamps to their own clients in Europe. What happened after a few days? The own clients came back to the Croatian company saying that all these lamps broke after a few days, or some of them never worked, and things like this. And actually, they returned the lamp to the Croatian company, which had either to repair the lamps itself, or basically find all the solutions. And so the company, the Croatian company, actually requested a refund or a new batch of proper lamps to the Chinese supplier, which the request was unfortunately ignored. Second case is pretty similar. It involves granite and stones from manufacturing in Xiamen. There was an advance payment made of 70,000 euro, which for SMEs could be a very important amount. The goods were received, but actually the thickness of these plates was much lower than what stipulated in the contract. The company, the Bulgarian company in this case, engaged a laboratory in Bulgaria to make an inspection, to issue a test report. They sent the test report to the Chinese seller, but they say this is not true, this is fake. They also involved their own laboratory and they made their own testing. They say, look, this is proper. So the Bulgarian company requests a refund or a new batch of products, and the request was ignored. Third case, actually very recent. It was in July last month. Polish company, they purchased steel and metal from a manufacturer, a supplier in Busi, and the full amount was paid. 30% at the time of the order, 70% at the time of shipping of the goods from China. The good arrived, everything was all right, quality was all right, but the quantity received was smaller than what it was supposed to be received. Actually 7 tons of steel per container. The Polish company asked for the supplier to resend the missing materials back. The Chinese company say, okay, we would be happy to do so, but first you have to make a second order. Obviously the Polish company didn't agree to do so, because maybe you might have encountered the same situation also in the second order. So that's what happened. The fourth case is a bit slightly different. It still involves steel and metal, steel from Wuxi suppliers. So what happened here is that the goods were never shipped. At the beginning, the supplier mentioning COVID reasons, they couldn't go to the plant, they couldn't ship the goods, and a lot of things, which could be true. Of course, we know lockdowns here are very frequent and severe, but after 2 months, they were still mentioning these COVID issues. And after a while, they just stopped responding emails. So the result is that the goods were basically never shipped, and this company disappeared. So all these cases have something in common. Of course, it's very evident that here, all these cases, what they have is that an advance payment was made before actually the goods were received by the buyer. But there are also many other things in common. And this is to say that judging from these commonalities, you can easily identify potential cases like this in the future. And this is what we call red flags. We grouped 6 main flags, red flags. Of course, there could be many more. I would also like to say that if there is one of these red flags, if you identify one of these red flags, it doesn't necessarily mean that the company is a bad company, is a fraud. It might be, it might not necessarily be like that. Also, if there are no such flags, it doesn't necessarily make the company sick. So, of course, these are just, I would say, some good practices, something that we see from experience. It is not a legal advice, not at all. It's always something that you have to be very cautious with. Take these as tips that we share with you. So the first one sounds very obvious, but in all these 4 cases that I just mentioned, and also many other, the seller doesn't have its own website. So when European companies buy these materials, often they do it through Alibaba or platforms like this. But these sellers, it's very hard that they have their own website, or if they do, they have a website only in English or in many languages. They have in Russian, in Polish, in Czech. But they don't have it in Chinese language. So there is nothing wrong with that in theory. The point is that you have to remember, if there is no Chinese language on the website, then the legal information of the company are not disclosed. You will not know what's the legal name of the company. You will not know where is the address, where is the company based. So we think that if there is not a Chinese version of the website, I don't know, this is a red flag. Second point is that very often the stamps that are used by this company are not proper. They don't have legal value in China. So stamps, company shops in China have a standardized color, size, shape, which looks pretty much like this. Of course, there could be differences. Sometimes in very rare circumstances, there might be another shape, but usually when you buy goods from Chinese suppliers, it's going to look pretty much like this. So you see the big star in the middle, red star, the Chinese name, like circle, and certainly they don't look like this. These stamps, they don't have any value at all in China. So if you see stamps like this, you have to know that these don't have value. These ones are good. A third flag that we have is of course, the advance payment. Of course, the main objective, the main goal of a scammer is to have the victim pay in advance before actually the goods are received, and that's the goal. So of course, it's paying in advance is a pretty common practice, and it's very hard to basically use other alternatives. But actually other alternatives are also very common, like documentary collections, letters of credit, and these are of course costly. They cost more, sometimes a few percentage more, but we think that maybe it's worth taking the risk, well, not taking the risk, sorry, paying more instead of taking the risk, especially for first-time transactions. If the seller is a long-term partner, if you have done business with the seller before, then maybe you might consider other payments, other risky payment methods like paying in advance, and things like those. But if it's the first time, we try to recommend to avoid as much as possible this advance payment, even though it will not be easy to convince your partner to use alternative methods, but do as much, do your best to do so. Another issue is that sometimes the bank accounts provided by the seller, it doesn't belong to the company, or it's a different company name. Sometimes even a single word or a single character might change. Or maybe the bank account is from a region, is from a bank located in a region which is not the same region where the manufacturer is based. So the manufacturer is in Jiangsu province, the bank is from Anhui or things like this. Or in some cases, it could even be a personal bank account of the owner of the company or things like this. You should make sure that the bank account exactly matches the name of the company, the location of the company, and things like this. A very important red flag, which we see very often, is that sometimes these scammers, they are legal existing, they are legal companies, but you have to keep in mind that establishing a company in China is pretty cheap. It doesn't cost much. And then when you register it, you don't necessarily need to pay the registered capital at once, immediately. You can pay it through, I think, 30 years or for a long period of time. And it's very, very, very likely that scammers like this that haven't paid anything, or have paid only a very small percentage of this registered capital. This means that if they haven't paid the registered capital, they don't have big assets that could be used to compensate eventually for the loss if there is a legal action. I'm pretty sure Eloisa will provide more details on this later, but this is very easy to check. There are many platforms. We use one. This is a screenshot here, and this is a standard and a random company. You will see there is information on shareholders, how much percentage, how much the amount of the registered capital provided by each stakeholder, but also how much of this capital was paid. And in this case, nothing. So be careful. I'm not saying again that if this is an issue, but in most cases of scams, this was the issue. This was an issue. And last, we have well, there are other cases, more fees, notary fees, or other administrative fees, or COVID test fees, or whatever, any fees that are suddenly requested. Maybe not much when buying from China. It is mostly the case when selling to China, but be aware that any fees should be clearly agreed in the contract, and there cannot be fees like this suddenly asked. So these are 6 red flags that we have. Of course, I'm going a bit fast because of time reason. We can discuss more in the Q&A section. But make sure that remember that if there is one of these red flags or 2, it doesn't necessarily mean that the company is a fraud, is a scammer. Even if there are no such red flags, it doesn't make the company safe. These are, again, common things that we see in practice. And you might disagree, but this is at least what we see from the scams, from the cases that we receive. So in addition to identify these red flags, there are also some actions that you can do. Again, 6 actions, we like to see the 6. So the first immediate step that you should do, no matter what, you should ask for a copy of the business license of the Chinese seller. This is like the ID card of the company, and this is a standard practice. Nobody's going to be offended because you ask for a copy of the business license. This is how the business license looks like. It contains all the information, the legal information of the company. You should also see that the scope of the business of the company actually includes export-import. If not, then the company in theory couldn't do this business. Once you get a copy of the business license, of course, you should verify that the information on it are true. And China has been pushing a lot for this social credit system. There are different platforms where you can check information on the company. This is let's say, the official one. There are also a few others. Basically, you put the name of the company here, or the social, or the number here, and you will see the basic information. There are also other platforms like Chatting and Channel we use, which are more complete. If you buy a very basic subscription for 100 euro, you can also access a lot, much more detailed information like risk analysis and previous legal proceedings that involve the company and things like those. And at the same time, something very important, sometimes these companies want to showcase the certification of the product, quality management certification by international bodies, SGS and similar. If so, go to the directories of this international certification body to see that the company is actually there, because sometimes these certification pictures are photoshopped. Yeah, sometimes you should also make sure that the person you're negotiating with is actually authorized to do so, that even work for that company. Maybe make a call to the company, say, hey, is this person here? Ask for the business cards with the Chinese name, the naming characters, and not the English name like Coco Wang or things like those, which might be hard to identify later. Very important. If you are not sure about anything, contact us, the SME Center. We provide the service for free. Again, we're not a law firm. We just do very basic checks. But we always, it's worth to check with us or with the embassy of your country in China. We also have a lot of information about some companies that have been involved in previous scams, and actually in some scams, it might be the same company. So we always invite you to check with us first for an informal, let's say, opinion. Very important, because of mobility issues, now you cannot actually travel to China to inspect the goods, to make sure that the goods are of good quality. You can hire an auditor, an inspector on the ground. There are chambers of commerce, embassies even, they might have a network of such experts that for very relatively low fees can go to the factory, they can check the goods, they can test the goods and make sure that the goods are in line with what we agree. Because and this is very important, because once the goods leave the Chinese port and arrive in your own country, if there are issues, then the situation is very complicated. There's very little you can do. And then, of course, I would like to end this presentation by reminding you again that everything I say is practice. It comes from practice. It's mostly tips. Of course, there are law firms like lawyers like Eloisa or the firm where she's working that that's their job, and they will make in-depth due diligence for you on bigger transaction, complicated cases, and you should always do that if you have the resources, if you think it's possible. But for very basic, simple transactions, maybe 5,000 euro, maybe sometimes it's not worth to do, to engage a law firm, and maybe that's where you could follow our tips of red flags and prevent the actions that we just mentioned. So that was in short the presentation. Remember, the USME Center is funded by the EU, and we are here to help you. Everything we do is for free. We have experts. If you have questions, just contact us anytime and let us know. Thank you, and yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Alessio. It was a very interesting presentation. Thank you for providing us the 6 red flags that we should pay attention to. And also thank you for the 6 steps that we can take to prevent being scammed. But let's say that worse comes to worse and we're still scammed. So let's hear what are the steps we can do then. So I would give the floor to Eloisa. Eloisa, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Helika, and thank you very much, Alessio, for your sharing. And I hope everyone is seeing my presentation clearly. So if there is any technical problem, please let me know so I don't have to speak with the air without anyone listening. Also, thank again very much CICC and the USME Center for inviting me again to this seminar. I'm very happy to share my experience with all of you. Some of you might have already seen me or participated in other seminars where I was speaker. I am Eloisa Hu, a Chinese practicing lawyer in Wang Jing and Zhich law firm. I am the holder of certified information privacy professional and certified information privacy manager, and I work in data protection, trademark protection, commercial disputes, and a lot of foreign direct investment projects in China. Coming back to the topic, and Alessio shared with us those red flags of the typical cheaters or the typical scams. And it's very practical because in Chinese, we also say that prevention is better than a cure. But of course, if unfortunately the scam happened, there is always something that we can do. So this is what I'm going to talk about with you, the steps that we can take, the actions that we can take after the scam. Usually there are 2 different approaches. One is the criminal procedure and the other is the civil action. So how to pick how to select one of them, because the two of them cannot be applied at the same time. It cannot go in a parallel way. So how can we decide which way to go? It depends on the nature of the scam, of the incident. For example, if it's about the details of the performance of the contract, like for example, I ordered 100 cups and at the end I just received 50. So if it's a dispute about the quantity or quality or the delivery time about a contract performance, it most likely is a zero action. So in this case, you need to bring the case to a court or the arbitration, depending on which way you guys agreed. In case you bring it to the police probably will tell you that this is a commercial dispute and we don't have jurisdiction over that. We are the police and we only catch like criminals. And in which case would be most likely a criminal case. A very typical scenario is that, for example, you are talking with your supplier, right, over email or even WeChat, and somehow the bad guy got into your communication, intercept the email, and they changed the email of the supplier, and they pretend to be the supplier to talk to you and give the bank account. So you transfer the money to the wrong account. In this case, it's a very typical criminal fraud. So it's better that you go to the police directly and take the criminal procedure. In real case, in real life, of course, it would be more complicated than what I just mentioned. But the first step is always to determine the nature of the incident. And if you are not sure about that, you can like seek for help to maybe the help desk that we have. And also maybe go to some professionals to see what kind of, what nature is this incident and which way to take. And we will start from talking about the criminal procedure, and I will talk about it according to these 5 elements that we are seeing. First of all is the precondition of going through the criminal procedure. And like I just mentioned, it has to be a real fraud. It has to be a criminal case. So typically it's like the email fraud, or maybe the counterpart is somebody that doesn't even exist, or it's not a factory, it's just some guy in front of the computer and showing you pictures of a factory of products that never exist. And this, in this case, is our typical criminal cases, typical fraud. So you can go to the police and report it as a criminal case. So what Alessio mentioned about like asking for a business license, that's very practical and very useful. And also checking it on the public credit platform organized by the Chinese government. That's also a very reliable source that you can check if they are real or they just like a shadow company. Second point is the jurisdiction. What does that mean? If you want to report a crime, right, to the police, then you need to go to a certain police station. So which police station I should go? Is it the place of the offender, or is it the place where the criminal action happens? Right? So you need to determine which way to go. And if it's online fraud, like I just mentioned, the email fraud, it's very hard to determine like the place of the offender, for example, because it's some guy that in front of the computer, so you don't know where he physically is. Or the place where the criminal action happens is also like online among those emails, right? So it's very hard to determine which place is. And here I want to share with you a case that we had before, and it's an email fraud, like I mentioned, and the bad guy just intercept into the email exchange between the buyer, which is a foreign company, and the seller, which is a supplier in Zhuhai in Guangdong province. So almost close to the payment, the bad guy just changed the email of the supplier and pretend to be them and give the buyer the wrong bank account, which is a bank account located in Guangzhou, which is another city of the Guangdong province, right? So the buyer, without really knowing that it's a cheater and the email has been changed, paid the money to the wrong bank account. So means in the bank in Guangzhou. And in this case, maybe you guys will start to think, so which place, in which place the police has the jurisdiction? Is where the supplier is, means Zhuhai, or where the bank account is, means Guangzhou, right? In this case, typically, it's where the money is, where the money transferred to. So in this case, should be Guangzhou. If you report this case to Guangzhou police, they probably don't have any ground to reject your reporting, right? But in this case, fortunately, the supplier, the local supplier in Zhuhai is a very influential, or it's a big company locally. So they also argue with the police saying that, okay, somebody stole my identity, right? And what was supposed to be mine, the money for the goods, were paid to the wrong guy because the bad guy pretended to be me, right? So the local police also helped to file the case, which is very helpful because first, the local supplier can help you with the communication with the police, so they can keep an eye also on the progress of the case filing. So it will be very helpful if also you choose a supplier to be a very reliable one, and also maybe has kind of influence in the market and also locally with the police. So if anything happens, it really could help a lot. And the third thing is the documents that should be presented for this case filing. And here we also need to divide it into two scenarios, right? If it's the local supplier that help you to file this case, and of course, in this case, the identification documents will be from the local supplier. So it will be a Chinese business license. Everything is document produced inside China, so it will be easier. But if you want to present the case as a foreign company, then in this case, you might need to present the documents of the business incorporation. And if you cannot come from abroad to China, maybe you need to entrust somebody else to file the case for you. So in this case, the power of attorney is also needed. And also some evidence should be presented. Like for example, if in the email fraud, you also need to present the email to show how the bad guy intercept and got into your communication and instruct you to pay the money to the wrong guy, right? And in this case, the document needed would be sometimes the police will ask you for a notarized and legalized version of the incorporation, the business incorporation certificate, and also the power of attorney. So we might need to take this into consideration because it might take some time. And some local police will be flexible, and considering the urgency of the case, it might allow you to file for the case without the notarization, legalization of the business incorporation certificate and the power of attorney. But later on, you also need to further submit that. So that's something we need to consider. And later, after filing for the case, the thing that we want to achieve is that for the police to block the bank accounts, because it's a very important measure for the victim to recover the money. If the money is still inside that bank account instructed by the bad guy, and having that frozen by the police will help you in the later procedure and also increase the possibility of recovering this amount. And also following after the case is filed, you might want to also assign somebody to help you to follow up the case. In a criminal procedure in China, the victim does not necessarily need to participate in the later lawsuit. It's usually the procurator representing the country, right? And pressing charges against the bad guy. And the victim does not necessarily need to participate in this process. But of course, having a legal representation in between the procedure will help you know the updates of the case, and also keep an eye on the money, the amount recovery, and also the development of the investigation. So it will also be very helpful. This is the criminal procedure. And the other way is to go through the civil action. But of course, the precondition is that this is not a criminal case, because if you file for a civil case in the court and later during the investigation, the court found out that maybe something criminal activity is in this process, and the court will stop the trial and will ask to transfer the case back to the police. So it's important for us to determine what's the nature of the case. Imagine if you go to the civil way first and you prepare all the documents, notarize, legalize, submit that to the court, and later after the hearing, the court tell you that it's not a civil case, something criminal is inside, we need to stop it and transfer it back to the police. Then imagine how much time you have wasted in between, right? So it's important for you to decide the nature of the incident first and go to the right authority to start your procedure. And the second part is about the jurisdiction. It's always about the jurisdiction, like in the criminal procedure, because if you want to file the case in the court, right, you need to find the right court. Which kind of court has the jurisdiction? So in China, based on the civil procedure law, it's the place of the registered address of the counterpart, the place of the delivery of the goods, etc. These places, the court of these places, they all have jurisdiction over the dispute between you and your supplier. And also, if you have a very well-crafted contract with your counterpart in which it has arbitration clause, then the arbitration commission agreed in the contract will be the place that you need to submit the dispute to. So this is the jurisdiction. This is the court that has the jurisdiction over the matter. How do I know where the factory is? How do I know where the company is? So it always comes back to the business license, right? But if you have the copy of the business license, and you will see where is the registered address, and you can go directly to the court of the registered address. And in order to file the case, either it's a lawsuit in the court or an arbitration, you will need to present certain documents, such as the identification of the plaintiff, the power of attorney, and some basic evidence. In this scenario, there is some differences between the requirements of the documents that should be presented to the court and the documents should be presented to the arbitration. Usually in the court system, they will require the identification documents, the power of attorney to be notarized and legalized. So it will take some time before you can actually file the case. But if you have a very well-drafted contract and has an arbitration clause as the dispute resolution clause, then you can go directly to the arbitration commission, and the majority of the arbitration here in China does not require the identification documents and power of attorney to be notarized or legalized. So having that arbitration clause in the contract will give you this kind of benefits, especially when the plaintiff is a foreign company. So when filing for the case, you don't need to spend a month or two to prepare the notarized and legalized documents from abroad. After the case is filed, we can also apply for the asset preservation, which is a very effective preemptive measure, because think about after you file the case, even if you win the case, if the counterpart does not have anything, does not have any assets, then you will have nothing to enforce upon, right? So it's better that at the same time that you fight for the civil case, you also apply to the court to preserve their assets. It could be bank account, money in the bank account, or some real estate or some cars registered under the name of the supplier. These are the assets that you could enforce upon after you get a winning judgment. So it's important that you also take this measure, apply for the asset preservation at the same time that you apply for the the lawsuit in the court, or also the arbitration commission. The last point I want to talk about is actually the quality inspection, because a lot of dispute might relate to the quality of the product. Then a quality inspection will be a very good evidence to show if you as the plaintiff really has some ground to sue against the supplier, right? And when it comes to the quality inspection, it always comes back to three questions: where, who, and when. Where? Should I do the quality inspection in China or abroad? Based on our experience, I would personally suggest that, if possible, do the quality inspection in China and before the official delivery of the goods. So if anything goes wrong, the quality is not as good as you expect, and you can actually also reject the delivery. And the other good thing about having the quality inspection in China is that whether you appoint a third party or qualified institution, the report they issue will be an evidence, a proof produced in China. So as far as this institution is with reputation and is qualified, the report will most likely be recognized by the court in the later dispute. So it will be a good evidence, as we say. But if you do the quality inspection abroad after the good arrives, one technical problem would be the qualification of the inspection institution. So even though you might use like SGS, this kind of international inspection institution, be noted that probably not all the judges know about this kind of institution, because they are not like technical experts, right? Mostly they will rely on the qualification issued by the Chinese government, or maybe there is a list of qualified inspection institutions. So they will check if this institution that you appoint is on the list. That's point number one. And the other point is that if you have the inspection abroad, then the inspection report issued by them will be an evidence produced abroad. Now, since 2 years ago, in the civil case, the court does not require the evidence not issued by official authority to be notarized and legalized, even if they are produced abroad. But in any case, it will involve like maybe translation problems. So you might need to also translate them first, because they are written, they are produced abroad and written in foreign language. So there will be a lot of additional work. So my suggestion is that if possible, do that in China. And who, of course, if you can appoint a qualified inspection institution with this kind of certification, it will be very good. But in any case, if you have that in the contract with the counterpart, both agreeing that I will just appoint a third-party company to do this inspection, and both parties agree to the result of this inspection done by this third party, then it will be also fine. So if, as far as both parties agreed, this third-party inspection institution does not have to be the certified one, as far as the both parties agree. And when it comes to when is the good time to do it, I would suggest that if possible before the delivery. So if anything goes wrong, you can just reject the delivery. But in any case, it should be maybe right after the goods arrives to the final destination, because the longer it takes in between the inspection time and the delivery of the goods at the final destination, more changes could have happened in between, and the counterpart might argue that you don't know if anything happened in between the time, but maybe when my goods arrive in the final destination, they were not in the same states when they were subject to the inspection. So maybe when it arrived, they are good products, their products compliant with the quality standard that we agreed to. So it's better to have the inspection, the quality inspection, as soon as it arrives at the final destination. That's let's not do it much later than that time. At the end, I want to share two cases with you. One is the car headlight case. This is a case subject to the arbitration because both parties have a contract with the arbitration as the dispute resolution clause. The problem with this case is actually about quality or quality standard, even though it's very clearly stipulated in the contract that the car should be right-hand drive because it will be sold to a country where the driver is on the right side inside of the left side. This Chinese vehicle company produced normal cars, like cars for left-hand drive. So the headlights actually point to the wrong direction. So when these cars arrive to the destination, the transportation department find out that the headlights will point directly to the incoming cars, to the drivers of the incoming cars. So it will be very dangerous, and traffic accidents might happen because the driver from the incoming cars will be blindsided by these headlights. So these cars cannot go, cannot circulate, cannot be sold to people. So the buyer in this case filed arbitration against the seller. In this case, we were representing the buyer, and the good thing is that we find a lot of articles, scientific articles, explaining the difference between the headlight for the left-hand drive cars and the right-hand drive cars. Because the arbitrator, they were not expert with vehicles or with cars. They need to understand that there is this difference, and the difference is so dangerous that it could cause a traffic accident. So at the end of the case, the arbitrator supported our argument and ruled that there is breach of contract from the seller side. The compensation was granted to our client. The other case is a shoe case in the court. Filed to the court, local court here in Guangzhou. A European company was buying a lot of shoes from a local factory here in Guangzhou, but unfortunately, they did not really do the quality inspection back in China before the delivery of the goods. And also after the shoes arrive in the destination country, they opened the container, of course, and they found out that the shoes were having a lot of defective problem. They unfortunately, they did not do an official quality inspection right on the spot, even though they communicate with the local supplier. They send a lot of pictures to the supplier. At the end, when we were in the court and trying to argue this case to the judge, and at the end, the judge just ruled that because the quality inspection, even though it was done later in between the lawsuit procedure, it cannot reflect the status when the shoes arrived in the country of destination. And that's why I said that it's better that you do it if you can in China, and if not, do not do that much later than the arrival of the goods, because the inspection should reflect the status of the goods when they arrive at the destination. So the supplier could not make up other excuses to say that the quality issue was not due to their production. And that's my part of the session. And if you have any questions, you can raise your hand or just unmute yourself and ask the question to maybe Alessio and me in the Q&A section. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eloisa. Thank you for this excellent overview of the criminal procedures on one hand, and then of the judicial procedures on the other hand. I think we learned a lot, and now it is time for us to move on with the Q&A session. Yeah, let's open the Q&A session and see if anyone has a question. But of course, I'm also inviting the speakers themselves to ask questions from each other as well. I already see that Alessio here has a question. So I'm giving floor to Alessio as a privilege of moderator.
Yeah, while we wait for other questions, obviously, and a question that we receive very often. So basically, you know, I think again, civil action or criminal is something that, from the perspective of a small company, like I buy 10,000 euro of goods, 15,000, 20,000 euro of goods. You know, civil actions might sound a bit scary, long. Maybe I will receive the money back in 3 years, in 4 years, who knows? Is there anything that could be done, you know, before actually escalating to civil action? Maybe something in between, like some I don't know, anything that could be the companies could try before engaging a law firm on a civil action?
Yes, actually, it's a very good question. The civil action, meaning filing the case to the court, might actually take a lot of time, of course, because there are several levels of the trial. There's the first instance, the appeal, right, and also the enforcement. So we'll be looking at a time span that's quite long. And the alternative could be, but also involving a lawyer, could be issuing a lawyer's letter to the counterpart and address this matter to them to show that we realize your breach of contract, and we know the Chinese law, we know that you are breaching the contract, and which is a violation of the law, and we also entrust lawyer to talk to you. So kind of open a way of negotiation. So in some cases, it will work if the supplier is in good faith. And also maybe if they want to maintain this long-term business relationship with you, they might be very cooperative also for this negotiation. They might maybe just like change the product or increase the quality of the product. So in addition to like filing for a lawsuit directly, sending a lawyer's letter or just send a lawyer to talk with them to negotiate upon the matter could be a good solution.
Thank you very much, Eloisa.
Yeah.
So let's take a question from the audience. So I think both of you can
Mostly
comment.
Eloisa.
Mostly Eloisa, but both of you can maybe comment. So working with China-based legal advisor adds costs, obviously, to the business operations, and we're talking about really SMEs and sometimes very small micro companies that are experiencing issues. So the person would like to know if there's any efforts the Chinese institutions are making to improve the situation. Maybe there are some plans for new laws, anything that you could mention.
Or maybe, sorry, if I can also add something, because we also received this question. Is there maybe a government desk or institution that companies, in this case, could refer to, CCPIT or, you know, bodies like this for help?
That's also a very good question. I think probably on CCPIT level, there will be some consultation channel, but I'm not sure. Probably yes. That's one way that we can consider. And the other way, like for example, the public platform where people can check the information of the company, the credit platform. It's also a good thing, also a show of effort from the Chinese government to actually provide this information for free for anyone to check if this company is legit and if this company really exists. The information there is quite detailed and quite complete. If you have experience checking history of the Hong Kong company, you will see that the similar platform provided by in Hong Kong is with charge. So we charge for some money, although the information will be very complete too, but it will be a point like payment. So at the very basic level, the information is free, and then going into more detail, then you might need to pay some fees. But in with the Chinese this credit platform, all information is free, so you can have a very detailed information. And there is also some app like mentioned, like what Alessio mentioned, right? And the details, the information there are quite detailed, and also with some small fees. As a member, you will also be able to check maybe the lawsuit record and maybe any administrative punishment that this company received before. So this is also another channel. The third channel, I would say, is that nowadays a lot of law firms, including the one that I'm in, well, we have the WeChat public account in which we will post articles always related to legal matters. So some articles will talk about similar matters that we talk in this seminar, like how to maybe recognize these typical red flags of this, the scams, and how to initiate a civil procedure, etc. So there are kind of different resources that you can go to.
Thank you, Eloisa, very much. So I see that we had a question that just disappeared, but yes. Okay, we have just time for one last question. So I can see that we already have a question. Sometimes the Chinese companies are in good faith, but struggle to fail to understand the requirements of EU conformity. How can businesses help their Chinese partners with this? So EU businesses, Alessio, maybe.
Yeah, so maybe, yeah, exactly, because yeah, issues exist on both sides, obviously. I think the bottom line is that in the EU, it is the importer's responsibility and the ability to make sure that the products imported conform with EU rules. So, you know, that's something that in case the buyer or the importer should make sure to do. Sometimes Chinese suppliers might not be aware of all the CE certificates or various certificates that must be obtained by EU bodies and not by Chinese bodies. Yeah, I mean, it depends, and it's your job to ensure this, because, you know, if something happens, the EU authorities or will come to you, not the Chinese supplier. So yeah. That's it.
Yeah. Thank you, Alessio, for this short answer. So let's see if there's any more questions. Quickly checking. Otherwise, we're already a bit over time, so it's also okay for us to finish the webinar here today. And yeah, I see there's no more questions. So in that case, thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar. Thank you again for the speakers for those insightful presentations. We can share all the presentations today's presentations also with you later via email. And of course, at the EU SME Center, we're always striving for improving our services. So we would like to ask for your feedback. You can scan the QR code for feedback, and we will also disseminate the survey later when we're coming back to you with information.
If I may, one final comment. Again, do not hesitate to contact the USME Center, or if you're an Italian company, say C or Eloisa directly. I mean, we are here, in our case, we are here to help USMEs, and we are here for you. So yeah, use us. That's it.
Yes, thank you, Alessio, for the reminder. And with this, we would end today's webinar. So thank you, everyone, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.